Oh yeah. Hey guys, today we're going to be making slippery elm lozenges or slippery elm balls, squares, whatever you want to call them, depending on whatever shape you make them into. Slippery elm is an elm tree that is native to North America. It grows from eastern Texas to the east coast, north of Florida, and into southern Quebec. Slippery elm can be confused with American elm, but the few differences is that American elm will grow upwards of 80 feet. Slippery elm tends to grow 40 to 60 feet, and slippery elm also has like little hairy, fuzzy like twigs on the branches. It also has a couple of different names, moose elm, red elm, just to name a few of them. So that's some of the differences. Slippery elm contains a substance called mucilage. Sounds pretty gross, I know, but and when you mix that with water, it forms a gel, and that's what coats your throat. Like if you got a sore throat, it's good for sore throats, heartburn, IBS, upset stomach, all the good fun stuff. So let's start making some. You need honey and slippery elm bark powder. Those are really the only two ingredients that you need to make this. I'm going to show you, I add a couple extra things. So first we're going to start with some raw honey. And I'm not measuring this, obviously. I'm just squeezing in a good amount. Alright, that's probably like, I don't know, half a cup maybe. And then I'm just going to sprinkle some of this on. You just want to mix it a little bit at a time so that you don't want to add too much because then it'll be too dry. But you just want to mix it in until it's a thick dough. Another cool thing about these too is you can use infused honey. I'm just using regular plain old raw honey today, but you can take raw honey, put it in a jar, take some fresh sage sprigs, and fill up your jar with honey, covering your sage. Leave it for a few weeks, and you will have infused honey. And sage is really good because it's antiviral, helps with sore throats, headaches, has vitamin A, vitamin C, and vitamin K, which helps blood to clot, so that's good for a lot of stuff. Now my kids don't really care for this plain. It doesn't really have a bad taste. It's just, it's like, I would say mildly earthy. So it's still pretty runny right there. So what I like to do is I add some raw cacao powder, which is just raw cocoa powder, really is all it is. You can just use regular cocoa powder, it's fine. So I just add a little bit of that. Not measuring, I'm just kind of, and then a pinch of Himalayan salt, just to give it some flavor. And they like it much better that way. Doesn't matter to me, I like it either way. But these work for heartburn like that. I mean, they're awesome. Good to have on hand. Okay, so that's still going to be too runny, so we're going to add a little more of this. I can't get Charlene to eat these at all, though. She'll say, I want a chocolate too. So then I'll give her a piece and she goes, ugh, that's yucky. So if you're somebody who's like pretty fussy about like textures and stuff, you're not going to like this, I don't think. But yeah, other than that, it should be fine. Because it gets kind of slimy as it dissolves. We're getting there, we're getting there. see that. This stuff does get quite sticky to work with, obviously. Not only because the honey's sticky, but then, you know, you get this slippery elm bark powder wet and it slimes right up. Because that's just the nature of the beast. Okay. Move this over. And I just take some of this, the bark powder, and sprinkle it on my board. Then you just kind of want to work it like you would a dough till it gets pretty well incorporated and it's not quite so sticky. I honestly have no measurements for this. It's just if you start with roughly, I guess, well, depending on how many you want to make. If you just want to try it out, you could start with like half a cup or even a quarter of a cup of honey if you wanted to. I just made some the other day, so I don't need to make a lot because we have plenty. So just start with like a quarter or a half a cup of honey and just add enough powder to make it into a dough. If it gets too dry, add a little more honey. It's kind of like the whole chips and dip thing, right? Like, you know, you either run out of chips first or dip. Gotta try to even it out somewhere. Super sticky. Okay. Make sure that doesn't stick. Woo. All right. I forgot my rolling pin. Hang on. Always something. Oh yeah. Okay, that is, I'd say, roughly 1/4 of an inch thick. Somewhere around there. And then I take my pizza cutter and I just go across it one way. Kind of like when you make homemade noodles. And then just gonna go the other way and make little squares. They don't make them into balls anymore because they take longer to dry, and I think it would probably be easier for my kids to choke on them, so I don't do that anymore. Alright, so that's what they look like. Another thing to note about slippery elm is, even though it's not like listed as endangered, as far as I know, it's been heavily harvested for its medicinal uses. So if you do get slippery elm bark powder, try to find some that's not wildcrafted. Now, as far as I know, the one that I've linked down below for you is not wildcrafted. I reached out to the company to see if they could clarify for me, and I haven't heard back from them yet. So if they do get back to me and they say that it is, I will look and see if I can find a different powder. And since slippery elm and American elm look similar, if you do find American elm out in the wild, don't think that you're going to get the same effect, because you won't. Different tree, not going to work. Okay, so the next step with these is to put them on like a piece of parchment paper, throw them in your dehydrator. I put them in at around 135 or so for about 5 hours, and hardens them right up. That's what they look like all done. And you just suck on them like a piece of candy, and like I said before, you suck on it for a few minutes. It's gonna kind of at the end of it break apart and kind of get slimy, but that's what it's supposed to do. That's why it works. So yeah, that's how you make slippery elm lozenges, squares, slippery elm balls, whatever. If you want to make them into balls, you can just take little squares and just roll them like that, but they just they take longer to dry, and like I said, I was kind of afraid it might go right down my kid's throat, so I just make them into squares, easier all the way around. And before you store them, you might want to coat them in just a little bit more powder if you're worried about them sticking, like if you live somewhere it's really hot in the summertime. But try to just keep them in like a cool dark cupboard, you know. So that's that. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope you found this helpful, and we'll catch you on the next one.